I never imagined the person who would turn me out into the world with nowhere to land would be my own daughter. I never thought the man she chose as her husband would speak to me like I was a burden he was forced to carry. I certainly never expected her to stand beside him while he chipped away at whatever dignity I had left. But life has an odd sense of timing. Sometimes the moment you're broken is exactly when the universe places a hidden truth in your hands. My name is Margaret. I'm 58 years old, and for most of my life my world revolved around two people, my husband and my daughter, Amanda. My husband and I built our home with our own hands in Cedar Park, just outside Austin. We raised Amanda there, celebrated every holiday inside those walls, collected years of laughter in the halls. And when cancer claimed my husband last year, that house became too heavy to bear. Every corner carried his absence. Every room echoed with what I missed most. So I sold it. I told myself Amanda and her husband Chad would help me through the transition. Amanda wanted me to stay with them for a while. Chad didn't say much, just a half-hearted nod as he stared at his phone. From the moment I moved in, I felt more like a tenant than family. I stayed in the tiny back room, cooked meals, kept everything spotless, tried to be invisible. But no matter how small I made myself, Chad always seemed irritated by the sight of me. He dismissed my questions. He changed the channel when I was watching something. He sighed dramatically whenever I walked into a room. And once, I still hear it in my head, he muttered, "Freeloader," under his breath as he passed me in the hallway. I tried telling myself I misheard him. But mothers know when someone resents their presence. Amanda tried smoothing things over. "He's just stressed. Work's been difficult," she always said, but silence can be its own betrayal. And then came the night everything shattered. I had cooked dinner, chicken pot pie, Chad's favorite. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock. Then, without warning, Chad looked straight at me and said, "When is this situation ending? We're not running a charity here." The words hit harder than any shout could. I turned to Amanda, begging her with my eyes to speak up, to defend me, to be my daughter. She couldn't even meet my gaze. "Maybe it's best if you find something more permanent," she whispered. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I packed 2 suitcases and walked out the door. And they had no idea that the moment they cast me aside, life handed me a secret that would change everything. The motel I found that night wasn't the kind of place anyone stays willingly. The carpet smelled faintly of mildew, the wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the heater rattled like it was holding itself together with a prayer. But it was the only space that didn't demand I explain why a woman in her late 50s was standing outside in the cold with 2 suitcases and no one to call. I remember lying on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how my life had unraveled so quickly. I sent Amanda a message the next morning. "I understand. I love you." No reply. A week later, another message. A month later, another. Silence swallowed each one. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to stand on my own feet. I applied for jobs. Small ones, simple ones. The kind of work you'd expect anyone to get without much fuss. But each rejection felt like someone stamping too old, too broken, too late across my forehead. My savings thinned. My hope thinned even faster. One night, when the loneliness felt unbearable, I pulled out the single box of keepsakes I had brought with me from the house, the only box that held memories instead of clothes. Inside were old photographs, postcards from places we meant to visit again someday, and at the bottom, something I barely remembered owning. A small, worn leather diary. My mother's diary. I almost put it away. Maybe a part of me wasn't ready to read her private thoughts. But the longer I held it, the more it felt like the only hand I had left to reach for. I opened the first page. Her handwriting brought memories rushing back. Her notes tucked into my lunchbox, the way she wrote with delicate loops. The early entries were ordinary: weather reports, grocery lists, frustrations about bills. Then came one that made my chest tighten. He came today. He wishes things were different. He wishes I could be his wife. But he has a family, a business, a reputation, and Margaret must never know. I read it twice. Then again. Entry after entry hinted at a relationship she'd kept hidden, a man she'd loved but couldn't claim. She never wrote his full name, only HJS. But the guilt, the longing, and something else, something she was afraid to say out loud. Then another entry stopped my breathing entirely. He promised that if anything happened to him, he would ensure Margaret received something that belonged to her, something no one could trace back. A trust, a lawyer's name, Goldstein. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Because in the darkness of that motel room, I realized my life hadn't just fallen apart. It had been built on a secret that was finally ready to surface. Once I saw the initials HJS in my mother's diary, I couldn't rest. I spent 2 days on the motel's shared computer, fingers trembling as I searched for anything connected to the name she had written, Harold James Sterling. A name I'd heard whispered in local news stories, charity events, and business headlines since childhood. The founder of Sterling Energy. A man powerful enough that rumors followed him like a shadow. But it was the second name that changed everything. Mr. Leonard Goldstein, estate lawyer. He was still alive, retired, listed at a small private office in Dallas. I didn't call him. My voice would have cracked before I got a word out. Instead, I wrote a letter by hand, explaining who I was and gently asking if he had ever known my mother. I mailed it with shaking hands and waited. 1 week, then 2. Then one morning, the motel phone rang. "Mrs. Louise," a voice said, "this is Leonard Goldstein. I've been expecting you for a long time." I took a Greyhound to Dallas the next morning, clutching the diary like it was the last piece of my mother I had left. His office was nothing like the glass towers I imagined prestigious lawyers working in. It was an old converted house. Warm light, wooden shelves, the faint scent of aging paper. When he saw me, his eyes softened. "You look like her," he whispered. He invited me to sit, and I listened as he spoke gently about my mother. He knew her far better than I ever imagined. He knew her heartbreak, her fear, her love. Then, without another word, he reached into a drawer and handed me a sealed yellowed envelope. The handwriting on it made my breath catch. To my daughter, Margaret Louise. I opened it carefully, afraid it would crumble in my hands. The letter inside was long: confession, regret, explanation. But the words that struck deepest were simple. "You are my child. I could not claim you in life, but I have provided for you in death. What I could not give publicly, I protected privately." Inside the folder, Mr. Goldstein slid toward me were accounts, certificates, assets, pieces of a life I never knew I had ties to, investments, a portfolio, property titles, total value just over $1 million. I didn't cry immediately. I sat in silence as the truth washed through me, layer by layer, shattering the story I thought I knew about my own life. For the first time in months, I felt something I had forgotten was possible: choice, power, a future. That night, sitting alone in my motel room, I whispered aloud. They thought they erased me. They had no idea what was coming. Returning to Austin felt strangely surreal. I didn't go back to the motel. It represented the version of me who had been discarded, dismissed, forgotten. The woman stepping off that bus was someone entirely different. Someone who knew where she came from, someone with means, someone with a backbone she didn't need anyone's permission to use. I rented a small modern apartment downtown, clean walls, sunlit rooms, and no lingering scent of despair. It was the kind of place Amanda and Chad never imagined I could afford, and that was precisely the point. Every day for the next few weeks, I studied. I watched videos about investing, attended small business meetings under a pseudonym, and learned the language of real estate. At night, I sat with my mother's diary on my lap, reminding myself of the woman who raised me, quiet, gentle, resilient, and the woman she wanted me to become. Then came the moment that felt almost unreal. On a random Tuesday afternoon, while browsing through foreclosure and auction listings, one property caught my eye. A familiar address. A worn-down apartment complex on East Austin. The same building where Amanda and Chad lived. My first instinct was disbelief. My second was something much sharper. The owner had defaulted on property taxes, and the complex was being auctioned. The unit where I had folded their laundry, cooked their meals, and been asked to leave like I was an inconvenience, it was on the verge of changing hands. I took a long breath. This was not revenge. This was reclamation. I contacted Mr. Goldstein, set up an LLC under the name ML Holdings, and prepared the paperwork. No one, not Amanda, not Chad, not even the auction board, would know the owner behind the veil. 2 weeks later, I placed a bid. 2 weeks later, I won. Quietly, legally, without a ripple. When the deed arrived, I sat in my apartment and stared at it for a long time. The same hands that trembled packing 2 suitcases now held the title to an entire building. A building that held the people who treated me like excess baggage. I whispered into the empty room. Let's see how Chad enjoys paying rent to the woman he threw out. The first letters went out a month later. Standard notices about upcoming changes, reassessments, new lease terms. Everyone else received moderate adjustments. Chad and Amanda's, triple. Market value plus fees. Nothing illegal, nothing vindictive. Purely business. Exactly the kind of business Chad liked to brag he understood. 2 days later, Amanda called me for the first time in months. I let the phone go silent. I was no longer desperate for her voice. Now she needed mine. When the rent adjustment letters were delivered, I didn't need to be there to witness the chaos. I didn't need to see Chad's face twist into that familiar mix of outrage and entitlement. I could feel it from the other side of the city, the sting of his ego cracking like dry glass. But this time, the power wasn't in raising my voice. It was in saying nothing at all. The building's property manager forwarded me a copy of Chad's email within minutes. It was exactly what I expected. Dramatic accusations typed in angry bursts. This is highway robbery. We have been loyal tenants. I demand to speak to the owner immediately. He signed it as if his name held weight. It didn't. Not anymore. I instructed the manager to respond using standard policy. Nothing personal, nothing extra, just the rules he believed applied to everyone but him. Meanwhile, Amanda began calling again. Her messages were quiet, hesitant, nothing like the confident tone she used when Chad was in the room. Mom, can we talk? Things aren't good right now. Please call me back, I'm worried. Chad is so angry, I don't know what to do. I listened to every voicemail. I answered none of them. This wasn't punishment. It was the echo of a silence she had once given me. Meanwhile, the other tenants adjusted easily. Many even expressed relief that repairs were finally being done, repairs the previous owner ignored for years. Hallway lights were fixed, pipes replaced, landscaping restored, locks upgraded. Chad didn't notice any of that. He only noticed the blow to his control. He started leaving handwritten notes stuffed under the office door. Messages filled with threats, insults, accusations. None of them earned a response. A man like Chad needed an enemy he could see, a target he could shout at. The fact that he couldn't find one was eating him alive. The building staff quietly told me he had begun pacing the hallways late at night, checking the mailboxes more than once a day, muttering to himself as he walked to his car. He even cornered the maintenance worker one afternoon, demanding the name of the property owner. The man simply shrugged. "I don't know who signs my checks, sir, just who approves my supplies." Chad didn't like being powerless. He liked it even less when Amanda began questioning him. Neighbors reported raised voices, doors slamming, muffled crying, furniture scraping. The cracks in their home life weren't forming. They were widening. One night I drove by, parking far enough not to be seen. Their windows glowed faintly. I could make out Chad's silhouette pacing furiously. Amanda sat hunched over the kitchen table, her head in her hands. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, it simply felt inevitable. Because when you build a life on arrogance, the smallest shift can bring the whole structure down. The messages from Amanda changed in tone long before her life did. The early ones were hopeful, hesitant attempts at conversation, like she wanted to pretend nothing had happened. Then came messages soaked in tension, spoken in a voice tight with fear. Finally, silence. A silence that said more than words ever could. I sensed something was coming. I just didn't know how soon it would arrive. One evening, rain lashed against my windows, drumming a restless rhythm across the glass. I was settling into bed when the intercom buzzed. A soft, nearly apologetic sound. I almost ignored it, thinking it was a delivery to the wrong door. But then a voice cracked through the speaker. This is Amanda Harmon. I'm looking for my mum." My heart stopped. I pressed the door release without speaking. 10 minutes later, a weak knock sounded against my apartment door. When I opened it, she stood there completely drenched, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes raw and swollen, clutching a grocery bag like it was the only thing keeping her steady. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I stepped aside. Amanda entered with the hesitance of someone stepping into a place she wasn't sure she was welcome in. Her clothes were soaked all the way through, her hands trembling. I handed her a towel and brewed tea the way I used to when she was a child, each movement slow, steady. We sat. She held the cup between her palms like she was trying to warm her bones. "It's gotten bad," she whispered finally. Her voice was small, so small it hurt to hear. "Chad, he's not the person I thought he was. He's angry all the time. He thinks someone is targeting us. He's obsessed." I stayed silent. "He goes through my phone," she continued, "checks my messages, follows me sometimes. He keeps saying you're hiding something, that I'm hiding something." My breath snagged at that. She didn't notice. "And last week, he said something that scared me." Her chin trembled. "He asked what I was keeping from him, what you were keeping from him." I finally spoke. "And what did you tell him?" "That I hadn't spoken to you, that I didn't know where you were." She swallowed hard. "But that was a lie. I found your building's address on a maintenance notice. I came 2 days ago, but I couldn't bring myself to knock." A long silence stretched between us, heavy, aching, real. "You didn't just stand by him," I finally said. "You stood with him when he threw me out." She flinched, pain flashing across her face. "I know," she whispered, "and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." We sat there, 2 women separated by choices, by silence, by years of unspoken wounds. Then she said what I never expected to hear. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know how to be around you anymore. But I miss you, and I needed to feel safe again. I didn't hug her, not then, but I made room for her on the couch, and that was more than either of us had done in a long time. After the night Amanda showed up at my door drenched in rain and desperation, an uneasy calm settled over everything. She didn't call often, but when she did, her voice carried a trembling honesty I hadn't heard in years. It was like she was relearning how to speak without fear. Chad, on the other hand, was unraveling. My property manager called me one morning. "You may want to be aware," he said cautiously. "Mr. Harmon has been acting erratically." Erratically was an understatement. Chad had stormed into the management office, demanding the owner's identity, pounding the counter like he was entitled to answers. He sent furious emails from multiple accounts, angrier each time one bounced back, with the same calm response. "Your concerns will be addressed according to policy." That phrase alone almost drove him wild. He began haunting the hallways at night, checking the mailroom repeatedly, treating every new notice posted on the bulletin board like a personal attack. Even the maintenance staff grew wary of him. He confronted one of them over a routine inspection, shouting that it was all part of a bigger plot. He didn't know who the owner was. He didn't know it was me. And that ignorance was burning him alive from the inside out. One afternoon, a thick envelope appeared in my building's drop box. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words carved into it with such force they nearly tore the page. "I know what you're doing. You think you're smart, but you don't scare me. I will find you." No signature, of course. But the handwriting, I would have recognized it anywhere. Chad wrote like a man who lived in a permanent state of clenched fists. My attorney advised not to respond personally. Instead, we documented everything. The threatening letters, the tampered emails traced to his IP address, the fabricated legal inquiries he attempted, the witness statements from tenants who heard screaming and glass breaking. It wasn't revenge. It was self-protection. Meanwhile, Amanda was shrinking into herself. Tenants told management that she'd been seen sitting alone on the back steps, face buried in her hands. She had sold her car. Their lights were off and off. Groceries minimal. Stress etched into her posture. The tension inside that apartment was suffocating, and then it broke. One night, a neighbor reported a loud argument, voices sharp, frantic. Someone mentioned hearing the words, "You ruined everything. You're lying to me." Then silence, a heavy, frightening silence. Chad left the apartment early the next morning, luggage thrown into his trunk, tires screeching as he sped away. Amanda watched him drive off from the window, her face pale and empty. 2 hours later, she was at my door again. But this time, she wasn't trembling with confusion. She was trembling with a decision. Amanda stood outside my door that morning with no makeup, no excuses, and no wedding ring. Her eyes were red but steady. She didn't look like a woman who had been abandoned. She looked like a woman who had finally walked away. I opened the door before she could knock twice. "He's gone," she whispered, voice hoarse. "He packed a bag and said he'd be back when I came to my senses." I changed the locks. There was no pride in her voice, only exhaustion and relief. She stepped inside and placed something gently on my coffee table, a familiar leather-bound book, my mother's diary. "I read it," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to pry, but I found it in my closet. You must have left it after the last time I visited." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Amanda sat on the couch, hands clasped, words tumbling out before she lost the nerve. I didn't know about the inheritance, or Harold Sterling, or any of it. Mom, I didn't know who you really were. I didn't know you had spent your whole life carrying a secret that wasn't even yours. Her shoulders sagged. And while you were fighting your own battles, I let a man convince me you were just inconvenient. She choked on the word, disgusted by it. I became someone I don't recognize, someone who closed the door on her own mother. I sat beside her, not touching her, not rescuing her from the weight of the truth. She needed to feel it. Then she whispered the words I never expected to hear. I left him, for good. I don't know who I am without him yet, but I want to find out. I want to be better than the woman who let you walk into the night with 2 suitcases. For the first time in years, Amanda looked at me the way she used to, as if I were home. Slowly, I placed my hand over hers. You didn't lose yourself all at once, I said gently. You lost yourself in tiny choices. Now you'll find yourself in tiny choices too. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. She leaned in, hesitated, then hugged me, not desperate, not apologetic, just real. Later, after she left for her small new studio apartment, I sat on my couch holding the diary that had reshaped my life. I opened the back cover and slid in a folded note. It was for Amanda to read someday. Not now, not while we were still rebuilding. You don't need to earn my love. You just need to see your own worth again. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I walked through my quiet home, the one I bought on my terms, with my own strength, after rebuilding my life from nothing. I whispered to the empty room, I forgive you, I forgive me too. Because the truth was simple. They tried to erase me. They tried to silence me. But I didn't disappear. I rose. And now my story, finally, belonged to me.